Good day.
Good day, Rob Kirby. How are you, sir?
I'm okay.
Good. It's good to hear your voice. You sound okay.
Yeah, you know.
Hell, you might even sound good.
Oh, gee.
I don't want to get too excited.
No. Can't get too excited.
Well, friends, thanks so much. Buckle up. We have Rob Kirby from Kirby Analytics and the Kirby Analytics newsletter back on the line. He's a straight shooter, a silver bullet to the heart of the globalist empire.
How you be today?
I'm doing absolutely great, too, and I want to just start with a couple of things here. It's at the top of SGT Report here on Saturday as we're having this conversation, and here's the headline. In the thirst for war, Senator Inhofe releases fake photos of Russian troops in Ukraine. And let me start with the article. In his best attempt to impersonate war-crazed Senator John McCain, Senator Jim Inhofe of Oklahoma released photographic proof of Russian soldiers in Ukraine in order to push forward his bill to provide U.S. arms to Ukraine, or so he thought. It's just absolutely stunning. And the point here, Rob, is, as you brought up in the pre-interview, is the Mockingbird mainstream media in this country, which is bought and paid for by mega corporations, will not tell us the truth about a variety of issues, including what's going on in Ukraine. And there's no better case in point than Brian Williams.
Well, my response is that Mr. Inhofe is likely Brian Williams' bridge partner. The links and the treachery that's infested the mainstream media, unless, of course, you believe that Brian Williams is the lone cockroach in the woodpile. The depths and the depravity of the U.S. media cannot be overstated. This disgrace, this abandonment of and dereliction of fiduciary duty on the part of the entire Western press is unprecedented and unparalleled in the history of humanity.
Well, I don't think that's overstating it a bit. If anything, it may be understating it, because these people are responsible, right? They are responsible. Their duty as the Fourth Estate, their duty is to inform the people in a republic. And what they are doing is they are playing the side of the corporatists. Well, Brian Williams, case in point, I think he was making $10 or $13 million a year. How can somebody reading the news making $10 million a year possibly be trusted to tell us the truth? Also, I'd like to note he was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, currently chaired by David Rockefeller. You know,
Yeah.
How can we trust these people? They play both sides.
Well, the reality is the media conspires with and is complicit with the governing class and the financial elites and the globalists who control the world. And you see, we can't spend enough time addressing this, because this speaks to the very essence of everything we talk about, because we can bracket it all by saying conspiracies do exist. Conspiracies are actually the norm rather than the exception, and they're hiding in plain view. When you've got sniveling, lying scumbags like Brian Williams, who are given such a wide berth to sell such enormous lies in so many different areas regarding issues that so profoundly affect everybody. So there it is, the stench of the mainstream press. I'll tell you something. This is a very, very, very profound event that's occurred where regarding Brian Williams, because what it's done is it's put a big label on the entire Western press as a bunch of absolute treasonous pieces of garbage. And that's what we have what we have now got as a mainstream press. It's garbage. These people, you can't say nasty enough things about them. But you know what? They're signing their own death warrants, doing what they're doing. And I'll say that the loss of prestige that America has undergone with the revelations of this Brian Williams debacle is something that America is going to have a lot of trouble recovering from, because you know what? Their brand has been diminished enormously around the world, and they've become a laughingstock. Deservedly so too.
They've suspended him for 6 months. Who knows if he'll ever be back? If there's any justice, obviously he wouldn't be back. But he's just carrying the bag for the politicians. He's doing what the masters want him to do. And here's a point to back that up. This is from RT. Deja vu. Kiev MPs show quote proof. Pics of Russian tanks in Ukraine taken 6 years ago. RT was reporting that the pictures purported to show how Russia is intervening in the Ukraine and were used as evidence by U.S. senators who were pushing for lethal aid to be sent to Kiev are false. They're pictures that are more than 6 years old. It's just absolutely insane that these people are allowed to get away with this. And I don't think they're getting away with it. To your point, Rob, I think people are waking up around the world, certainly outside of this country. People are waking up to the treachery of the U.S. corporatist media and the politicians. These people are starving for more war. They love it. They have a bloodthirst, and they ought to be tried in The Hague, in the International Criminal Court. When this thing is said and done, they ought to be arrested and tried for their crimes against humanity. And I don't say that lightly. I say it with absolute passion and conviction, because these people are responsible for the deaths of innocents under false pretexts.
I couldn't agree with you more. And isn't it a sad day when anybody who doesn't have their head buried in the sand to get a glimmer of the truth, they need to go to the official state news outlet of Russia? I mean, if anyone had told me that would be the case 25 years ago, I would have absolutely laughed at them. And yet here we are today, and the absolute and utter burning of a brand that the world had never known the likes of, America. It's been burned to the ground. The brand is destroyed.
Yeah, and that's why the alt media is exploding in popularity, because people know people recognize the trees that bear fruit, Rob. And
people want the truth.
People want the truth. They are tired of being lied to. And it's absurd that somebody would get on for a half hour once a day and read ridiculous recaps of world events in 22 minutes after you take the commercials out and be paid $10 million for that. It's absurd. It's the opposite of news. It's hardly news. Brian Williams' a joke, and he's just a sign of how corrupt the corporatist news tree has become. It's a tree that's dying, and no better case in point than CNN and their all-time low viewership. Why don't we bridge over to the financial calamity happening worldwide? We can talk about what's going on in the Eurozone. We can talk about what's going on with Wall Street banks and the absolute crumbling economy here in the United States. I want to talk a little bit about this West Coast shipping strike, but I ought to point this out to you, Rob, get your opinion. This is from Zero Hedge on Friday. Pretty bizarre thing happening here in New York. 6 people died in a fiery New York City train crash. 3 of the 6 were top investment bankers. This is from our friend Max Slavo at shtfplan.com. Let me read this to you. A vice president and 2 managing directors for the big banks with overlapping investment interests in defense contracting and technology were aboard this train in a dramatic and strange accident where the front carriage of the train exploded into a fireball. We must ask questions about what is really behind this tragedy. And Mac's point about that, Rob, is the fact that there were 400 people aboard the train, 6 died, and 3 of them were top investment bankers. What are the chances when we know that 36 dead bankers died just recently in 2014, and 9 more dead bankers have turned up so far in 2015? What do you think, Rob? Is this wet work or something? These professional hits?
It's really hard for me to speak directly to this latest train incident that you're speaking of, but you can't help but scratch your head and wonder at the rate at which bankers are being offed or are prematurely expiring in the last couple of years, and it certainly has caught my eye. And I'll tell you something. Having worked around the institutional financial markets back in the 80s and 90s, I never realized, certainly back in my days when I was highly connected to the institutional world, I never realized that banking was such a dangerous profession.
Right.
But apparently it is. It seems that it's probably more dangerous than being a police officer or a fireman. And who would have ever thought?
it's more dangerous, I guess, if you look at an actuary table, it's more dangerous to be a top banker on Wall Street or in the Eurozone than it is to be an underwater oil rig scuba diver, which I thought for many years had been considered the most dangerous job on the planet. Maybe that's not the case anymore. I want to go on the record, though, and say that I love and adore my family, and I love living on this planet, and as a Christian, I would never kill myself. I'm on record now having said that, and the reason I bring it up is because the Gray State director who lived in Minnesota just died, and he's accused of having killed himself and his beautiful family, when by all accounts he adored his family. They seem to be taking people out who care about truth, who are trying to uncover the truth, and as you know, Rob, dead men tell no tales.
I listen, I share the sentiments that you just expressed. I share them completely and utterly. And strange and unbelievable events do happen to people who fight for the truth, and we have plenty of examples that we can cite of this, over the past number of years. A number of major truth tellers or whistleblowers have met with very untimely and incredulous demises.
And it's hard to know exactly why all these deaths are occurring, Rob, other than to say that we know there is a derivatives Ponzi that's over $1 quadrillion that may well be unraveling because of what's going on in the Eurozone. And I want to give credit to our buddy Paul Sandu, who interviewed you, I think, just about a week ago. And, of course, I listened to that interview. I like Paul, I like his work. And I always love hearing you, Rob. And you said to Paul, and I quote, "The establishment of the Eurozone was intended by the globalists as a stepping stone to the introduction and implementation of one world government, one world currency, one world religion, namely the worship of state itself. And the destruction of the Eurozone as a concept is a wooden stake through the heart of a vampire. So it's an extremely important and monumental event," end quote. As it pertains to Greece, Rob, how much is Greece going to contribute to the implosion of the Eurozone dream?
Well, I mean, Greece is but one part, Sean, of what's really wrong and at the root of the ill-conceived Eurozone concept to begin with. Put very bluntly, Greece never did qualify under terms set down for inclusion in the euro. And the initial terms that were set down for countries to be included in the euro were all governed by a treaty known as the Maastricht Treaty, and that was drawn up in the early 1990s, and it detailed thresholds that countries had to meet in their sovereign finances to be considered for inclusion in the euro. And Greece didn't qualify under those terms. And so what they did is they had their financial advisors at Goldman Sachs using an array of derivatives to cloak the poor state of Greece's sovereign finances, and using derivatives, they basically put lipstick on a dirty sow, and they made Greece appear like they qualified using these derivatives. But you see, it's not just a situation of Greece being the only country where this trickery was used, because it was also used when Italy was included in the euro, because Italy back in the late 1990s, with Mario Draghi as their finance minister, they weren't qualifying under Maastricht Treaty guidelines either. And what Mario Draghi did at the time is he basically looted sovereign Italian gold reserves at the expressed guidance of Goldman Sachs, their bullion banker, and what they did was they leased sovereign Italian gold, which raised cash money, and then they took that cash money and they invested it in long-term capital management. Then long-term capital management went bust. And so now Italy was not only out the gold, they were out the money as well. Had this breakup of long-term capital, or this bankruptcy, been a public affair where it was transparent, and if everything had been made public, it would have been made very, very, very clear that Italy had leased gold and was frigging with their sovereign finances to try and qualify for the euro. And you see, the sad part of all this, and not surprisingly, of course, Long-Term Capital's chief legal counsel at the time was none other than Jim Rickards, a man who runs around cloaking or pretending that he's a gold bug. Well, Mr. Rickards would have been very, very well aware that Italy had lost their gold. And Mr. Rickards, who is I call him some sort of a flunky for the globalist cause, he was sent in to do the workout of long-term capital management, and this is why all the people, all of the executives of long-term capital management were basically sworn to secrecy, that they could never speak about the details of what happened in the workout of bankrupt long-term capital. And the reason for that, Sean, was as follows. If Italy had been shown to not qualify for the euro, very likely the Eurozone concept would have been stillborn and would have never happened. And you see, the globalists who control our existence didn't want that to be, because the argument goes that if you can't have a functioning or operating Eurozone, how in the heck can you ever pitch the notion of one world government, one world currency, one world religion? You see, it all falls apart as a concept if you can't even get it right with the euro. So that's the story in a nutshell, and that's why I have nothing but contempt for this man Rickards, who runs around preaching garbage about SDRs, and basically in his utterances, what he's talking about is giving the people who screwed the financial world up completely to the point where it will fail. He's saying, let's just give them a do-over and let them have another crack at it. And you know what? That dog doesn't hunt. Not in my world.
Well, yeah, as another pundit has pointed out recently, SDRs are down, I think, 90% when valued in gold since their inception. So SDRs are obviously no fix. And I agree with you about Jim Rickards. The fact that he would be a consultant to the Pentagon, the fact that he has been a consultant, I believe, to the CIA, obviously makes everything he says very suspect. And, it was Jim Rickards who, in a King World News interview several years ago, I wrote an article about I was very upset because he was talking about one possible out for the United States government to reback the dollar would be to seize the gold held at the New York Fed on behalf of other nations. That was one of the suppositions, a possible fix that he concluded the government might actually do. And it wasn't long after that that Germany started to say, we'd like our gold back, please. And the other thing is, Rob, even if that were to occur, that would be an act of war. You can't steal nations' gold hoards without going to war. And that's what he was saying as a possibility. That's what he was saying was a possible fix right there on KWN. And I found it absurd, but of course, that's what we see this government doing in Ukraine.
Sure.
Let's take the Ukrainian gold.
Do notice, Sean, Jim Rickards is a globalist tool. And do also notice how much and how wide a berth that man is given in the mainstream press. I mean, he's presented as a politically acceptable person who is an authority on all things gold. Well, this man is, he might as well be on the same bus as Brian Williams. He's a cockroach. And and the thing I say about cockroaches is they never come in ones. When you see a cockroach, you've got an infestation, and we have an infestation. Jim Rickards is part of the infestation. Cockroach.
Well, let me back you up and say this about Mr. Rickards. In an interview that took place with Max Kaiser over the past year, Max was talking about the 9/11 event with Rickards. And Rickards said that, his team had researched a lot about what happened on 9/11. And, of course, Rickards only will support the official story. And when Max pressed him about the funding of the attacks and the options leading up to the event, Rickards said it is really of no consequence, who those options tracked back to. And then he said they didn't even look at that. Because, of course, they can't look at that. They can't look at the details that lay under the official story, because if you dig just past the surface of the official story, you find a lot of sinister Wall Street forces and companies, AIG, Carlyle Group. You just find so many sinister forces under the surface that you just can't possibly scratch below the official story if you're Jim Rickards and you're holding the water for the Pentagon.
Hear, hear. Globalist tool.
Yeah. Okay, then let's finish up our conversation about the Eurozone. You say Greece never qualified for inclusion in the Eurozone. Do we need to also talk about this tipping point that's being reached? What about Spain? What about Italy? What about the rest of this Eurozone experiment?
Well, the Eurozone experiment, it was failed at its inception because a bunch of people or a bunch of entities were put together who had no right being there. It's really no different, Sean, than you or I going to apply for work in a hospital, claiming that we're brain surgeons, and somebody handing us, dressing us in scrubs and putting us in an operating room, telling us to operate on somebody's brain. I mean, we just simply aren't qualified to do it. And the countries that were included in the euro simply had no business being there. So it was failed from its inception. And you know what? If the sad and strange thing is, if we had a media that reported real news, we probably would have known about this, when it was happening.
Right.
But thanks to the people like Brian Williams in the world and the Jim Rickards of the world who obscure these facts and try to keep the truth away from people, nobody knows. But you see, it's the same sort of thing that goes on when the law that's on the books in America that allows the intelligence czar in the United States to grant companies waivers from reporting their true financial condition. And when we go back to the financial crisis of 2007, 2008, if there's anybody in the listening audience who doesn't think that law was in play and applied to some banking institutions, and I would suggest any one or maybe a number of the following names, namely Morgan, J.P. Morgan, Citi, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley. It wouldn't surprise me in the least if one or more of those institutions were granted that waiver in the name of national security, that they might have been technically insolvent, but didn't have to declare so because they were granted a waiver that said that they didn't have to report their true financial condition. That law is on the books. It exists. It's been on the books in America since 1934. And anybody who doesn't think that these things were invented and are in existence for a reason, give your head a shake. So if you don't have accounting, Sean, how do you know if a company's good or bad?
Right. That's right. That's exactly what John Williams has been focusing his work on. And if you take a look at the BLS report, are we to actually believe that there's only 6% of the people in this country that are unemployed? It's a joke. Everybody knows it's a joke, so much so that people are actually coming out. Pro-government people are even coming out and accusing the BLS of fudging the stats.
Yeah, well, no, you're right. There are some people who are beginning to wake up and are beginning to sing off our hymn sheet, Sean. But one thing the globalist cabal can always count on, the likes of Brian Williams and those of his ilk will never say anything.
Well, they can't say anything if they want to keep being paid $10 million a year. And, I want to round out the Brian Williams thing, too. If anybody thinks we're being too harsh on Brian Williams, the man lied about taking RPG fire while on board a chopper in Iraq in 2003, and he didn't just say it in 2003 or 4 or 5. He said it as recently as 2013 on the David Letterman show. Very specifically, very overtly, he restated the entire fabrication, the entire lie, which he calls misremembering. He misremembered the facts, and the chopper pilot who did take RPG fire has come out to say Brian Williams was never aboard that helicopter, and Brian Williams arrived safely an hour later aboard a different helicopter. That's about as sociopathic as it gets, Rob. To just make up crap like that out of whole cloth and then say it on the David Letterman show in front of a national audience really speaks to the character of who Brian Williams is. And it really speaks to the character of who these globalists are, because those are the politicians that behave the same way, that get up and lie. The John McCains, the Lindsey Grahams, they get up and they lie to the American people, and they have no problem sleeping at night. Just like Brian Williams had no problem sleeping after the David Letterman show in 2013 in which he restated a lie. It's unbelievable, and it really speaks to their sociopathy.
It does, and I'll say it again. The damage that this has done to the prestige of the American media and the American image is in my view, it's irreparable. Cannot be fixed. It needs to be ripped apart. It needs to be torn down. Well, it's that bad.
It is that bad. You know, the bottom line is that people are hearing you and I talk about these issues, and we talk with a lot of passion, but it's because we love, well, you're in Canada. It's because we love our countries. Rob, you're in Canada. I'm here in the States. I love my country, but this is not the America I signed up for. Okay, this is not the America that I want my children to inherit. I don't want all of these bankster ill-gotten debts. I don't want all these unconstitutional wars based on false pretexts. I don't want my tax dollars go to fund false flag operations that murder innocents. This is why I'm speaking with so much passion, and I know it's why you are too. It's because our hearts are breaking for the fact that there are masochistic, sadist, insane, probably sociopaths in charge of so many of these Western governments, namely the United States government.
Well, Sean, for the record, I grew up admiring America, but I can no longer admire America. America used to occupy the moral high ground. America has frittered that away, and America does not occupy the moral high ground anymore. And the ground which the leadership of America currently occupies is nowhere in my field of vision. It's that low. But America, in my view, Sean, isn't ruled by Americans anymore, because I do find the rank and file Americans that I've known through the years are very, very upstanding people. But unfortunately, your country has been taken over by a criminal cadre of thugs who care not for the good name of America and have literally done everything in their power to bring absolute havoc to your country. Because you see, a strong America stands in the way of this globalist dream.
That's right.
Or this globalist wet dream. And this is why the good name of America in the globalist mantra has to be destroyed, so that they can replace it with this poison piece of garbage that they call one world government, one world currency, and one world religion. And you know what? That dog isn't going to hunt.
Right. Yep. They need to trample the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights. They need to make us forget about what made us great, and they need us to embrace this tyrannical one world government nightmare. And
yeah.
Well, Rob, I mean, the bottom line to me is that all of this stuff, right? The politicians offering fake evidence of crimes of Putin and Russia and the Russian military, it exemplifies the absolute lunacy, sociopathy, and the criminality of the powers that be in the United States, at the Pentagon, and the highest levels of the House of Representatives. It just exemplifies their criminal mindset. And I'm not sure how we're going to break free and take our republic back as long as these people are in charge. We just want to see the nations that we grew up loving. We want to see them return to the roots, the qualities, the foundations that made our nations great, especially, the United States. We're based on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. These are the things that the globalists want to destroy to get us to go along with their absolute maniacal plans. And I've long said, Rob, that at this point it's humanity versus the banksters, because I just think the banksters have bought up and they control everything. They control absolutely all the corporations. They control most all of the politicians. They control this paradigm. Maybe this is a good segue over to silver and gold to round out our conversation. We should always hit on silver and gold with Rob Kirby. Rob, Dave Kranzler, a buddy of ours, notes that SLV moved from 1466 in November to 1761 by late January, and that's a 20% move in 10 weeks. Dave predicts that silver will be the best performing asset of 2015. What do you make of Dave's prediction? Do you think there's any chance silver could be the best performing asset of 2015?
I think it could be. And whether it is or not is dependent on something you touched on, Sean, and namely, that's how much longer people are going to accept promises of precious metal instead of the real thing, which is the metal in its physical form. You mentioned the word SLV, and of course its sister is GLD. In my view, these are both absolute frauds that were created to basically deflect and make unknowing investors believe that when they bought this paper equity, they were actually getting real ownership of physical precious metal. I do not believe that to be the case. And there's a host of reasons why I feel this way, namely the prospectus for both of these funds. There's all kinds of holes with regards to custody of the physical metal purported to be held by the funds. I don't believe it's all there. I don't believe it's all physical metal, and I think they were convenient creations, like I say, to deflect legitimate money that would have been seeking physical metal, to deflect them into yet another paper Ponzi program.
Yeah, well, our listeners are well versed in this conversation. I guess at this point, there's really not a lot new to say about precious metals at this point, other than to say, keep stacking. I mean, if you're one of those people that likes the dollar cost average like I do, there's absolutely no reason not to continue to acquire physical metal. As I've said for a long time, Rob, none of my friends, neighbors, or colleagues are really awake to the silver and gold story. So,
in my view, and I've been saying this for over 10 years, there's no such thing as a bad day to buy physical precious metal.
There you go. Thank you, Rob. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Well, Rob, let me ask you this then as we wrap this up. The listeners are very supportive of you. Everybody really likes you very, very much when we post these interviews. You're one of our most popular guests. You're just such an honest, straight shooter, which we really appreciate about you. Is there anything we can do to support your work? Can you tell us about your website and your newsletter?
Yeah, we can find me on the web at kirbyanalytics.com. Keep the faith. And in my view, I'm not, and don't think I'm ever saying go and spend your grocery money or next month's rent on physical precious metal. But if you have money to put aside for your future, I don't think you can go wrong owning physical precious metal. And make sure that you keep it in your own custody, or only in a place where you know that you'll be able to retrieve it if things get nasty out there.
Yeah, that's right. All right, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, you know what? Oh, it's nice talking to you. You know why? You just hit it straight.
Thanks, man. Love you.
Okay, be good.
Be good. Talk to you later. Bye.
Cheers.